Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Batman Arkham Origins New Game Plus video walkthrough. This is the very first section and the beginning of the guide. We are in Blackgate prison. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next installment in the Arkham series that was not fronted or created by Rocksteady. It was in fact done by a completely different team. And I can put everyone's apprehensions at bay by saying that they've made a great Batman game. Although it does have some lack of polish in areas and some problems with it, it's still a great game, and a lot of people are going to enjoy it. I can also say that I found it more difficult than the previous two. Not necessarily because the game itself was harder, but because it didn't quite function as well as I remember them functioning. But I'm going to go into that in much more detail later on in the guide. This is New Game Plus, and a lot of people are probably wondering, why is this not I Am the Night mode? Well, I personally don't really see the difficulty in the permadeath difficulties and this phase of permadeath challenges that's happening recently. You know, Dead Space kind of kicked it off, a lot of other games are using it, and I think that's a really lazy way of creating a hardest difficulty on your game. I would much prefer a hellish difficulty with good checkpoints than one of average difficulty with no checkpoints. And that's just a personal choice, guys. If you're looking for that, I'm sure there'll be plenty of guides on YouTube, but I'm probably not going to touch it because to me there's zero fun in that at all. And that's just my stance on it. New Game Plus, however, is the next, challenging step up from the new game on hard, which is what I started on. And the tenets of New Game Plus are pretty simple. The game is going to throw enemies at you that it didn't before. They're going to be in different categories. They're going to be more challenging. There's going to be, more variety of them. People with chairs, people with stun batons, people with knives, people in armor, all that kind of good jazz. And you're not going to have the comfortability of the icons above the head warning you of incoming attacks. This is the same New Game Plus of any of the older Arkhams. Only this time it's a little bit different to my knowledge, as instead of getting everything back, they've taken certain plot-specific items away from you in New Game Plus. And I can't remember if it did that in previous games, but it does it in this. A little bit frustrating. You'll notice after that fight I was seeing what the shortcuts did, because I was trying to do moves using shortcuts that I was using at the end of the game on my first playthrough, which I didn't have anymore, so I was kind of confused when I'm trying to do these moves and they weren't coming out, so I had to double check exactly what I had. But as far as combat goes in the game, there are a variety of different ways to approach it. The ranking system seems to reward variety, not getting hit, and high combos. Sometimes it doesn't seem to reflect what you're supposed to do so much. You'll think you've had a really good run and then you'll get no skill points at all. And all the ranks do are they give you a modifier on your experience, and your experience goes towards buying abilities, so on and so forth. That's not something you're going to be worrying about on New Game Plus so much, because you're already going to have the abilities that you want. And I should really say this before I forget, because it's kind of frustrating. So my favourite part of the previous Batman games was an ability that you could purchase quite early on, which made it so that if you timed your attack perfectly when you were landing on an opponent to attack another opponent, you would get a multiplier to your multiplier. So instead of it going up by 1, it would go up by 2. And what this did was it rewarded skill, it rewarded reflex, and it also made it much easier to perform the special abilities that make the combat so interesting. That move does not exist in this game. They've removed it. And I will never ever understand or forgive them for doing that. It's obviously an intentional balance choice. I just personally don't understand it at all. But that move is gone. It's replaced by other interesting things, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And there's a second thing that they've done which seems to be very confusing as well to anybody who had a lot of fun with these games. My Arkham City guide, if you haven't seen it, it's quite an old one now, was a New Game Plus guide as well. The only difference is between this one and that one is I didn't use any health upgrades. Instead, I went with base life to help the most amount of players I could, because there's nothing worse than a walkthrough where when you're watching it, the person has more life than you, so they can take a bigger beating, and thus you can't do it because you don't have the same amount of life. So to avoid this kind of thing happening, I didn't upgrade my life at all, and it's exactly what I was going to do for this game. But unfortunately, the people who designed it, I think they're called Splash Damage, what they've done is they have locked certain combat upgrades behind a progression path that involves mandatory life upgrades. So before you can even get to the awesome moves, you have to buy the health upgrades. And I have absolutely no idea why they would do this. It's almost like they don't trust the player to be able to beat their game. And it seems very strange. So the first 6 upgrades you're going to be getting if you go either path, or the first 3, sorry, on 2 different paths, are all life related before you can get any of the more interesting stuff. But it's really strange. But as far as combat goes, what I like to do is I like to do what you're seeing here. I like to separate the room, I like to keep in control, and I like to always be hitting people at different sides. That way the enemies don't have an opportunity to gang up on you. One thing that happens a lot in this game is they'll just put you in a room where you're immediately surrounded by 30 dudes. And it can be really intimidating, and a lot of the times the camera doesn't handle it so well, so it can get kind of frustrating. So combat's going to be one of those things where you're going to have to make a choice on how you're going to play. Are you going to use all the equipment, all the items, and get your fancy combos? Or are you going to just, instead of countering attacks, are you going to jump over people? Because the counter, especially when you can't see the icons, can be a really easy way of getting hit and getting tagged. Or are you just going to play it as normal? And I would recommend situational adjustments. There are times when I prefer to evade rather than counter because I don't really trust it. This game introduces a couple of new enemies that are definitely going to put a wrench into the proverbial machine, because they definitely affect the flow of the game, and I don't really like them, but that's me personally. It doesn't degrade the game in any way. This is me looking for a door as well when I should have just gone directly to the vent on my left. I don't know if you noticed that. The vent is straightforward. I don't know how I didn't see it. But there are a lot of interesting choices in this game as far as the combat goes, because it's probably the most in-depth it's ever been, with additional moves, additional things, but at the same time it seems to be the loosest it's ever been for me. And I did play Arkham City and Arkham Asylum quite recently, and there are things that happen on this game that really mystify me and puzzle me, and I can't really explain them, but what I'm going to do is when they crop up I'm going to tell you what happened, and I'm going to see if anybody else had a similar experience, because the game is buggy. And this is not me saying the game is bad in any way. There's just a lack of polish on certain surfaces that make these bugs happen. I've had bugs during boss fights, I've had bugs during scripting events where nothing's happened and I've had to reload the game. I've had bugs where enemies have died but stayed alive and thus not allowed the door to ever open. I've had a lot of really strange things happen. And I'm hoping it's just me. I'm hoping it's just one of those things, but I searched on some forums and things, and apparently other people have had similar issues, so it seems like there might just be that little lower level of quality to this game than the previous ones. But for all intents and purposes, they've made a really, really good imitation Batman game, considering they're not the team that normally does it. But did you see that just then? That's a fantastic example of what I mean. I used the Blackgate to stun the heavy dude, and then I immediately went into pressing X to do the beatdown, but for some reason Batman attacked the complete opposite direction to the guy, and there was nobody there. That is one of those moments where, something anomalous happens. Something that has never happened before in the previous games is happening to me in this game. And another good example is when you do the counter. Because the way Batman works in these games is he kind of does what he wants to do, and you can't control that. And it's the best thing about the combat. It's also the worst thing, because you can't control it. So sometimes he'll do a really quick jab, other times he'll do a really elaborate spinning kick, and you'll get punched if he does the spinning kick, whereas if he'd have done the jab you would have won. And it's this really random, rock, scissors, paper game at times, where sometimes jumping over an opponent is the best thing to do because it resets, the aggro status. Other times it's better to counter because someone's attacking you. It's all very situational, and hopefully I can give some better examples throughout this guide. But that is the end of the first video and the beginning of this walkthrough. So I hope anybody here watching for help has got that, and anyone here watching for entertainment has had that also. But thank you for watching, folks, and you take care now.